Hello and welcome back to Voyage of a Time Wanderer. Today I am here to share my Classics TBR for 2024. I absolutely love reading classic literature, and so I have come up with a list of 10 classics that I want to prioritize reading in 2024. I know these won't be the only classics that I read because there's a couple kind of pillar Booktube events that I always take part in, Jane Austen July and Victober, which are very classics heavy months for me. And then I also participate in Kate Howe's Patreon book club that reads a Victorian novel every other month. So I know I'm going to have some other classics added in throughout the year, but these are 10 that I would really love to have read by the end of 2024. In 2023, I read 23 classics out of the 120 books that I read, so that's just about nearly 20% of my reading was classic literature last year. So I think having a little 10 classics TBR is a pretty achievable goal for me for 2024, and I'm pretty excited about reading each one of the books on this list. So the first book that I have on my classics TBR is Crime and Punishment by Fyodor Dostoevsky. I'm basically riding the coattails of the high of how much I loved Anna Karenina by boldly putting another big, intimidating, gargantuan reputation, chunky Russian classic right at the beginning of my TBR. This is going to be my first full-length Dostoevsky. I have read his short story novella-length book White Nights maybe 2 years ago now, so I'm interested to see how I'm going to enjoy his writing style compared to Tolstoy. My understanding is that this is quite a philosophical book, but it also has some mystery slash crime thriller elements because we are following inside the head of a man who has committed a murder, as well as the investigator who is trying to apprehend him, and some other side characters who have been impacted by this man and his crime. I'm planning to buddy read this in February and March with the same friend that I read Anna Karenina with, and I'm looking forward to having another big Russian classic to dive into during the winter months. Book number 2 is Belinda by Maria Edgeworth. This was actually already on my TBR for Jane Austen July, and then I found out that it's going to be the Regency group read this year, and so I am shifting it up from my July reading plans to my February reading plans because I think it would be really fun to read this along with the Regency group. Jane Austen was a big fan of Maria Edgeworth, and so as a Jane Austen fan, I want to read the books that inspired Jane Austen and that she loved. And she actually name-dropped Belinda specifically in Northanger Abbey, so that's kind of neat. I've only read one of the other Northanger Abbey horrid novels that were specifically referenced in Northanger Abbey, so I'm really looking forward to getting to another one of the books that I know Jane Austen loved and enjoyed enough to actually reference in one of her novels. This book is actually one of the first English novels to ever depict an interracial marriage, and that relationship was actually edited out of future editions of the novel because it was so controversial at the time. And so as someone who's also in an interracial marriage, I think this book will be interesting from that historical perspective. This book follows a young woman, Belinda, as she comes of age in London high society and all the scandals and courtships that come along with that. Then books number 3, 4, and 5 are The Lord of the Rings Trilogy by J.R.R. Tolkien. As you know, if you've seen any of my other videos, I'm really not a fantasy person, but I feel like this trilogy just has such status within the literary world that it's one that's worth reading, even though I don't typically enjoy fantasy, and I'm really hoping that this is going to be my exception to that, and that I'm going to really end up loving this because it's like an 80-hour audiobook commitment or something like that. I ended up picking up these audiobooks. Audible had a Boxing Day sale, and so I was able to get all 3 of the audiobooks for just 1 book credit. So that was pretty incredible, and so I'm all stocked up in my Audible library and ready to listen to these. I feel like I'm going to read these in the spring, maybe in the April-May timeframe. I feel like that suits the image that I have in my mind of what the atmosphere of these books is like. I don't know if that's true. I've seen parts of the movie adaptations, but I've never watched all of the movie adaptations. I think I've seen the first movie and then never finished the second 2, and I have read The Hobbit, so I have a little bit of an idea about the world and Tolkien's writing, but I definitely don't know the full plot arc of the trilogy. I know that there is some beautiful writing because there are some quotes that I already deeply love from this series, even though I've never read it. And I know there's also a lot of kind of Catholic allegory that I'm hoping I will really appreciate, even if I don't enjoy some of the more fantastical elements. Book number 6 is Dombey and Son by Charles Dickens. I've found as I have read more and more classics, I've kind of found myself gravitating towards picking up Dickens less and less, and I feel like he is an author that maybe I'm not enjoying as much now that I have explored the wide world of other Victorian authors. But I do still one day really want to have read his complete bibliography. I'm almost halfway there. I do need to finish up Little Dorrit at some point this year before I pick up Dombey and Son. I started it in 2021, I think, and got about halfway through and then never finished it. And so I would really like to wrap up Little Dorrit before I begin Dombey and Son, but I'm not planning to start Dombey and Son until Victober this year. I've heard a lot of my bookish friends say this is like a top tier all-time favorite Dickens for them, so that makes me really excited to read it, and I've also heard that it has a really wonderful female main character, so that's another big draw for me. Apparently this has a much narrower cast of characters than some other Dickens novels, so I'm thinking maybe it might be a little bit more like A Tale of Two Cities, which I found had kind of a more manageable cast of characters, and that is my all-time favorite Dickens and one of my all-time favorite Victorian novels, so that bodes well for Dombey and Son. And in this book we're following a father, Paul Dombey, who runs a family business, which is the titular Dombey and Son, and he has 2 children, a son, Paul Jr., and a daughter, Florence. After I finish Dombey and Son and Little Dorrit, I will have read, I think, the top 5 Dickens books by longest word count, and so the rest of his bibliography will all be downhill from there, which will be kind of a nice feeling, knowing that every book of his that I have to read from here on out will be shorter than the longest ones I have read. And then book number 7 is kind of a partner to Dombey and Son, and that is The Doctor's Wife by Mary Elizabeth Braddon. Mary Elizabeth Braddon's sensation novels Lady Audley's Secret and Aurora Floyd have been 2 of my favorite Victorian novels to date, and I kind of fell in love with the sensation novel subgenre of classics thanks to her writing, and so I'm excited to be getting to another one of her novels this year. The main character in this book, Isabel Gilbert, is married to a country doctor, and I guess kind of escapes into the world of books at times and fantasizes about different lives that she could have led. And apparently the reason why I'm tying this into Dombey and Son is that Dombey and Son and her reading of Dombey and Son features quite heavily throughout this book, and there are spoilers for Dombey and Son in The Doctor's Wife. So I have to have read Dombey and Son before I can read The Doctor's Wife. So I'm planning to probably read both of these kind of back to back in Victober this year. Knowing the author and the genre, I can only imagine there's going to be a fair amount of discord in the marriage of the Doctor and his wife. Book number 8 is Mrs. Dalloway by Virginia Woolf. In the classics reading that I have done to date, it's been pretty heavily focused on 19th century literature and 19th century classics, especially Victorian classics, but I've branched out a little bit into Regency classics and French and Russian classics as well. So I really want to try to make myself pick up some more 20th century, more modern classics as well. And so this is kind of my token effort at that for 2024. There's 2 things about this book that really appeal to me. I know that it is set during the interwar time period, which is a time period between the First and Second World War that I find really fascinating to read about. And then it's also set during an extremely short time frame. And for some reason I find myself enjoying picking up and kind of collecting a list of books that are set in a very tight time frame. In this case, it's just over the course of a single day. We are following an upper-class, middle-aged woman named Clarissa as she prepares for a dinner party, and we're kind of just walking through her train of thought and various reminiscences as she prepares to welcome guests into her home. Book number 9 is Mr. Harrison's Confessions by Elizabeth Gaskell. This is one of her shorter works. It's kind of an extended short story novella length book. And in the Cranford miniseries, aspects of this were adapted alongside Cranford. I don't believe in the text there's any direct link between the story of Cranford and this, but since I read Cranford last October, I thought I would add Mr. Harrison's Confession onto my classics list for 2024. This is set in a small English country town, and we're following a recently graduated doctor, Mr. Harrison, as he begins practicing medicine. And I've heard from friends that have read this that it's quite humorous, kind of laugh out loud funny at times. So I'm hoping it's going to be kind of an easier, lighter breath of fresh air compared to some of the heavier titles that I have on this list. And then book number 10, the final title that I'm putting on my Classic Literature TBR for 2024 is A Tangled Web by L.M. Montgomery. Like Gaskell and Dickens, Montgomery is an author that I would eventually like to have read the full bibliography of, and so this is one of her standalone novels that I have never read, and it's one of her novels that is more geared towards an adult audience, so I think that's going to be a bit of a different reading experience than some of her other books. I know I've really enjoyed The Blue Castle, which is another one of her standalone books that kind of has an older audience in mind. This book features two intermarried families, the Darks and the Penhallows, whose complex family relationships all come to a head when the family matriarch, Becky, announces that she is reading out her will and kind of bequeathing the family heirlooms on people. And so there's a number of items that are up for grabs, but in particular everyone seems to be fixated on this one jug that has come down through the family over generations, and everyone wants to be the next person to inherit this jug. And so Becky announces that the name of the person who will inherit the jug is going to be revealed in a year's time. And so this book follows along with the events of that year and the family drama that takes place while everyone is waiting to find out who's going to inherit this jug. I think there's a lot of potential for some of my favorite aspects of Montgomery's writing to come out in this book. Her sentimentality, her humor, and the seasonal awareness in her writing I'm hoping will all have a chance to shine in A Tangled Web. So those are the 10 classics that I am planning to read in 2024. If you are prioritizing getting to a few classics this year, I would love to know what classic literature titles are on your TBR for the year. And until next time, enjoy wandering through the pages of a good book. Bye.